Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 67 of Retuning Your Firm. And it's Friday, the 11th of February, 2022. So what are we looking at today? We're looking at legal trends, what's happening in the legal world, particularly as we emerge from this pandemic. We're looking at CEO concerns. And as you'll see also, we're looking at leadership. And we're going to do a poll looking at new technologies. So welcome, everybody. Pleased you could join us today, and looking forward to a really interesting and exciting show. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, let me first of all introduce our panel. Panel are really important, as always. And our first panel member is Alan Belfield. Now, Alan is the chairman of Arup Group, and he's coming to talk us today about some of the leadership insights from what some of you may have identified was the UK's most admired company. Now, this isn't just professional services, this is all companies across the whole of the UK. Arup is the UK's most admired company, which came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think. And so I thought it'd be really helpful and interesting to ask Alan, who's the chairman of Arup, a little bit about, well, how can you lead an organization which is the most admired company? Where do you go after that? Well, I won't. You don't have to go too far in that direction, Neville. Alan, don't worry. Neville Eisenberg is our second panel member, and Neville, as you will know, is a very long-standing partner at a law firm, BCLP, now a senior advisor, and he was the managing partner there for, I think, 15 years. So I think there are very few management challenges that he didn't encounter in that role. And he's coming to talk to us a bit today about some of the trends in the legal industry. Now, I know he's well known for a number of laws in demand and other areas, BCLP cubed, etc. But I just thought, let's have a look at what are his views on some of the trends in the legal industry in this year and beyond. So that would be really interesting. And then the third panel member today, I'd like to welcome Richard Thorby. And Richard's kind of, I often think of the voice from the confessional, I suppose is one way of putting it, but he runs a very high-powered, effective executive coaching business, Metric Consulting, and talks to a lot of managing partners. And often that's the only time when a managing partner really can open up as to what the issues are that are keeping them awake at night. And so Richard has kindly agreed, obviously on a completely anonymous basis, to share some of the issues that are emerging in the current confidential executive coaching conversations. I'm the founder and chief executive of the Managing Partners Forum. We started this show just under 2 years ago. I think it was something like March the 15th, and we're nearly coming up to our 2-year anniversary, and still going strong. So with a good audience today, which is great. So thank you very much for being with us. Before we go on to the poll section, some of you will know, I've watched the show before. I just wanted to bring you a little bit of forum news. Firstly, if you're not watching the videos from the past shows, you're missing out, and do pass the word internally. They're a free resource. There are a couple of hundred now. We're getting hundreds of people who are watching them every month, and they're about 4 or 5 minutes is a really perfect length for a video for someone to sit down and really take it in. So we'll be adding 3 new ones today. So some about a week's time, they'll be out there as well. So please keep watching those videos. Mentor Match. The Mentor Match program is now launched. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. We've got 100 mentors who've already signed up, which is absolutely amazing. What are we trying to do? We're trying to bring together mentors and mentees, and then provide a secure, confidential place for both parties to engage in, and also to track all aspects of the mentoring relationship. Now, where we're at the moment is we went out a week or so ago to all the mentors, and as I said, about 100 have signed up now, which is amazing. And we're going out to mentees next week. So if you are a managing partner, or if you have people working for you, whether it's in finance, marketing, HR, tech, knowledge, learning, or any of the other areas of business services, management services, call it as you wish, we'll be shortly encouraging you to just let them know that if they're interested in becoming a mentee under the program, there's some amazing mentors, including sort of top 30 law firm managing partners have signed up, which I was personally honored to feel that they thought this was helpful. And it's never too late. That's the other point. It's a continuous program. We'll be running the algorithm literally every day. There'll be new matches. So it's not like other programs where you do 6 months and then everybody goes to quiet and then you do a shuffle of the cards. There's a constant program. We think that will be interesting too. So that's the Mentor Match. So don't miss that one. Innovation. We've got an innovation summit coming up in May. And that's in partnership with Oxford Brookes Business School. And we're looking at the Fast Track Innovation Guide and how that we think could be a really effective tool in strategic planning. And lastly, absolutely no mean least, to leave it till the end, but in a way most important, we've got 2 weeks literally until the submissions are due for our 2022 awards. So if you're thinking of entering the awards, and I know that both BCLP and Arup have both entered in the past, in fact, have been successful and won, please remember to make sure that your submissions are in by the end of February. And there's lots of information about that on our website and other places. So that's, I think, is probably enough on forum news. So let's just remind ourselves about the poll and what is it that we are actually doing here. Well, polls are very important in our experience because well, the quote from government is pretty clear. Your poll results are incredibly valuable in our analysis during these dynamic times. And so it's a great quote. I didn't ask for it, they gave it to us. And I think we are influencing the agenda because often the middle market, and most of the people on the call, we are middle market, it's very hard for policymakers to find out what the middle market really thinks. Because you're so busy running your businesses. But I have 5 minutes of your valuable time today. You're very kind. We get very high levels of response to these polls. So please, 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 when we do the poll, let me just talk a little bit about what you told us last time. First of all, this was a state of strategy poll, if you recall, that you did a couple of weeks ago. And one of the areas we looked at was the sort of the pendulum, in the sense of to what extent are firms prioritizing strategy and to what extent are they prioritizing operations. And the pendulum is definitely shifting back from last year, but still at this point, very few firms are prioritizing strategy over operations. Strategy is typically owned by the board and updated fairly often. That's good to hear. We find that more firms are now conducting environmental scans than was the case a year ago. I think last year, with what we found was most people were just relying on informal monitoring to know what was going on, polls, trends, whatever. But now people are a little bit more structured, actually doing proper environmental scans, which is good to hear. In terms of staying up to date on strategic thinking, pretty much the usual mix: briefings, alerts, books, and conferences. Not very much on, say, business schools or other sort of strategy consultants. So it's mainly those normal obvious ones. What are the most important activities when developing a strategy? The two that come through quite strongly are identifying strategic challenges and clarifying your core markets. They're viewed as the most important areas in developing it. What are firms less good at? Well, management systems being supporting the strategy, capabilities, clarity over capabilities, KPIs supporting the strategy. So a lot of people, I think, have got great ideas, but possibly aren't putting the systems in place to make sure that when they start rolling those ideas out, that all the bits of the firm are actually working together. And maybe as a result of that, and again, I think this is probably a view that not everybody would hold, but less than half of you would actually speak highly of your firm's strategy. Now, I think that's a bit sad, but there you go. That's, again, what we're hearing from, I mean, we haven't got any saboteurs. No one's going out there actively sabotaging the strategy. That's a relief, I suppose, but it would be nice to think that more of you speak highly of your firm's strategy. So I think there is still some work to be done. So our state of strategy poll would make that fairly clear, I think. So just a few pictures, 2 or 3, just to show you. The blue, if you can't see it very clearly, is the one that we did 2 weeks ago. The red was from May of last year. And basically, the further to the left, the more focus there is on strategy. So there's definitely a march from, the blue is definitely moving to the left. But again, most people are sitting in the middle with equal emphasis between the two. The environmental scans, that's the second one down. The informal monitoring in terms of how people stay up to what's going on externally, that remains high. But the blue, which is the one we did a couple of weeks ago, that's definitely grown significantly for the second one down, which is the environmental scans. And the last picture I'll just show you quickly here. This is to do with the, I would speak highly of my firm's strategy. The far right is without being prompted. Those are your perfect people out there selling you every minute of the day. You want lots of those. That's about 20%. Blue again being 2 weeks ago. In terms of the next one, I would speak highly if asked, and that's a key if. Again, blue is not very strong there. And then you've got a lot of people who would be neutral if they were asked, and people who know English well. I know we have some people who are from outside the UK on this call. Neutral in English isn't necessarily very positive in life. And I would be critical. There's a little 10% or so, which is over to the left. So those are some sort of quick images of what we're doing. So let's turn on now to today's poll. And today's poll, as I mentioned, is to do with new technologies. And what we really wanted to look at with new technologies was things like the relative importance of people and technology in the business model. really start from a broader space, drill down. What's been happening at your firm over the past 3 and 5 years? What are the drivers and barriers to change? So what type of firms have your firm been, types of technologies have you been using to generate and deliver services, not quite the same thing, over the past and then over the next 3 years? And what are some of the drivers and also the barriers to investment in new tech at your firm? So in terms of the first question, which was, if you recall, where would you currently position your firm on the following spectrum? Very clear that our business model depends primarily on the knowledge and ability of our human experts. I don't think anybody is down in the bits about depending on proprietary online systems or anything like that. In terms of where do you think you'll be? Again, slightly more nuanced. Half the people who thought they were going to be sort of currently depending on the knowledge and ability of human experts are now saying that that won't be less the case and it will move further down. But nobody is saying that they alone, that the business model will depend primarily on delivering content through proprietary online systems. What are the items that have changed most? The one that comes through clear there, just look down the list, would be the one around the technologies that are used to deliver services. That comes through strongest, followed by how you deliver the services to clients and the technologies you use to produce services. So very significant areas of change in the area of technology over the past 3 years. In terms of the ones that you expect to change most extensively over the next 3 years, very similar responses, that something like 70% say technologies used to deliver services, 62% technologies used to produce services. All the other responses are in a much lower numbers. What are the important drivers of change? Again, responding to demands of existing clients comes through almost 92% if you pick that at the top. And then it falls away a bit. The next one, I guess, is second, is taking advantage of new technological possibilities. So again, technology coming through quite strongly there. Number 6 was the barrier. And again, apologies if it was unhelpful, single choice when it should be multiple, but the biggest barrier that comes through quite strongly, and I don't suppose therefore the answer makes a lot of difference, is lack of time. We're too busy to focus on change. That's the thing that is, and again, this sort of picks up the state of strategy poll in a way, doesn't it, where people were too very focused on operations rather than strategy, and too busy to focus on change, I think is again saying something similar, but in a slightly different context. In terms of the next question, the 3 types of technology which are used to generate and deliver services, mostly it's going to be augmentation or enhancement of tasks previously undertaken by people, speeding up of tasks, and substitution of routine tasks previously undertaken by people. So it's around an augmentation and enhancement of tasks, not new. And there are some new options there, but they're coming in much lower numbers, as you can see. What about the types of technology that will be happening over the next 3 years, what your expectations are? And again, very similar outcome coming through. The new ones a little bit more, but not hugely. Mostly it's about augmentation, enhancement, or substitution of things that are already being done. In other words, the word I haven't used is efficiency, but a lot of people will talk about efficiency improvements. What are the most important drivers? Again, clients come through incredibly strongly there, followed by efficiency and desire to improve efficiency. And then the last question is, what are the main barriers? And again, this is for new technologies, but very similar to the barriers that we found when you were looking at change in general. Too busy, we don't have time to focus on change. Now, leaders shouldn't really be saying that, because I always think that if leaders spend too much time in operations, then they're not spending enough time thinking time, you could almost call it, but it's a little bit more structured than that, I suspect, for many people. Some people are saying that new tech is a bit difficult to incorporate, and some people saying that there's insufficient financial resources. So there's some other issues that get in the way as well, but the main one, I think, is about people and time and how you spend your time. And let's face it, the only thing in life that you can absolutely control is how you spend your time as a leader. So I'll stop sharing now. Thank you very much for that. And I will invite our first guest, which is Alan Belfield of Arup. And if you recall, Alan is going to be talking to us about leadership insights from the UK's most admired company, Arup Group. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for the invite. I'm delighted to be here today. So, as Richard says, I'm the chair of Arup. I'm an engineer by training, but I guess for the past 20 years, I've done nothing but people management. And for the people that don't know Arup, Arup is a collective of 17,000 plus designers, advisors, engineers, and experts working across 140 countries. And we're completely dedicated to sustainable development. So we were founded to be excellent. You know, excellence is at the heart of what we do. And we don't do that by ourselves. You know, we collaborate with our clients, with our partners, and the way we collaborate using technology, funnily enough, that we've just talked about, rigor, imagination, and our aim is to shape a better world. And as Richard said in the introduction, we just won an award by management today to be Britain's most admired company. Came as a surprise to me, actually. There are awards and awards. There are some awards that you apply for, and there are some awards that that just happen and they're given. And what's particularly pleasing about this award is it's voted by our peers. You know, we didn't apply. You vote for this. Everybody votes for this, and you vote for your peers. And it has some implications. And the simple implications are we're a professional services firm. It makes recruitment of staff easier. We're more well known. People think they want to join us. It's great for our current staff because it's confirmation that what they do is being valued, not just by us, but by other people too. And of course, with a bit of luck, the clients recognize it as the value that we bring. Now, to be fair, Arup does win hundreds of awards every year. This is a very good one, but I don't suppose we'll get carried away. But what I wanted to say today was I think there are three reasons why I believe Arup is special and we win these kinds of awards, if I'm honest. And number one is actually we are very purpose driven. We don't actually go out and say this a lot, but we are very purpose driven. You know, the aim of our people is to shape a better world. We want to shape a better world. And our ownership facilitates that. So we're owned in trust. Arup, who founded the company, placed us in trust. So we have no external shareholders. We own ourselves and we have no debt. And that means we can really focus on doing excellent work rather than maximizing profit. Of course, we have to make money. We're not a charity. But actually focusing on work and doing quality work, if we do good quality work, we expect to grow and we expect to make money, but it's that way around. And the work not only has to be excellent, it has to actually have a social purpose. It has to be socially useful. So our strategy is put sustainable development at its heart. So we're very purpose driven. That's number one. Number two is we are a professional services firm. It's about talent. We have brilliant people. We happen to be able to attract brilliant people. And that's one of the reasons the award is so important to us. So if I give you an example, in the UK, we probably have 16,000 applications for 400 places, graduate places every year. And they're all, you know, super specially great. And when you do the graduate interviews, they interview us nowadays as a firm and say, please explain why I should join you. So we can attract and we develop and we retain staff. We have grown completely by organic growth. And that means that within Arup, people know that their career depends on them. And they know that they are consulted and involved all the time. Now, of course, there's challenges in leadership, as we all know. Leading clever people is a real challenge. So, you know, the second reason why I think we're good is talent. The third reason actually is we do work on some amazing projects, and that has a circular argument. If you work on really good, exciting projects, people want to join us. And then the better that the people you have, the more exciting projects you can win. So we have lots and lots of projects. In fact, last year we did more than 17,000, which is, you know, the same as the number of people that we have. And they go from very big to very little, everything from designing whole cities and planning whole cities to designing individual buildings. And you will have heard of a lot of them, everything from, you know, the Sydney Opera House to the Winter Olympics is on. So you will see the Beijing Bird's Nest Stadium and the swimming pool. Their Arup projects, the Hong Kong Macau Bridge, King's Cross Station, Heathrow Terminal 5, the Angel of the North. It goes on and on and on. So there's lots of these projects all over the place. And we have 6,000 clients. And actually, the projects themselves do help shape a better world. So it becomes a circular argument about what we do and how we do it. So I think to summarize, why do we win these awards? We think if we're going to be making a safer, fairer, more resilient, sustainable future for all of us, and if we bring value to our clients and our communities, then we're going to attract great people. Then we're going to work on amazing projects, and we're going to have happy clients. And guess what? We'll win some awards. It's dead easy to say. It's very hard to do, Richard, and I'm sure you are well aware of that. Thank you. I think that's my 5 minutes. Thanks very much.
Oh, brilliant, Alan. That's fantastically great insights. And I think all of us probably aspire to some of those things, and some of us hopefully get a bit closer than others. But now I'd like to turn to our second guest for today, who is Neville Eisenberg, known to many of you, I'm sure. He is a senior advisor at law firm BCLP. Brown Cable Leighton Paisner was the managing partner of the legacy firm Bowen Leighton Paisner, get the name right, one forgets, amazing how quickly these things change. And I've asked Neville today if he'd like to come and share his thoughts on some of the trends in the legal industry, and he can obviously talk wider if he seeks, but I think in the legal industry, most people would see him as being a very wise sage. So what are the things that are going to be happening in his mind in this year and beyond? Over to you, Neville.
Thanks very much, Richard. Good morning, everybody. I was reading through a report published recently by Citibank last night. So I thought I'd kick off with one or two observations from that report, in which they say that based on their research, 2021 was one of the strongest years on record for the legal sector. They said that demand and the rate of growth in law firms was the highest since 2007. Which of course was just before the global financial crisis. And this high rate of growth applied to all segments of the legal industry, so not limited to the biggest firms or even to the US firms where most of their research is based. In fact, in the US, they said for the first 3 quarters of 2021, the average growth rate amongst law firms was 15% for those first 3 quarters. Much, much higher than the sort of average 3, 4, 5% that tends to exist within the sector. And they also observed that with operating expenses being much lower, one can expect very high profits for 2021 and the current financial year for law firms. For the future, they said they expect growth to continue, but at a slightly slower rate. Of course, they expect expenses to grow as economies open, people come back to work and there's more business development and travel, and therefore they do expect margins to slowly come under a little bit more pressure. So against that backdrop, I think there are sort of 3 trends that I wanted to briefly identify this morning. The first is the war for talent. So with this huge increase in the demand for legal services, there's been a severe shortage of lawyers at all levels. And this, I guess, has also been exacerbated by increased evidence of burnout, people reassessing their mindsets in relation to their career aspirations and their work-life balance. And in the UK, we've seen increasingly US firms poaching from the city firms poaching from the regional firms. And in terms of this latter trend, I think hybrid working has certainly made it easier for some of the bigger city and international firms to poach people from the regional firms in the UK. So of course, firms have responded with increased compensations, special bonuses, but I expect there to be considerable focus on frequent and transparent communication to staff, plenty of focus on culture, purpose, goals and values. I think we can expect to see some reconfiguring of office space as firms attempt to make offices a bit more welcoming, a bit more attractive to work in, and with more opportunities for collaboration. And really importantly, a continuing and probably increased focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and policies, including more collaboration with clients. Now, the second trend I want to focus on is strategy, because consistent really with what Richard was reporting at the beginning of this show, I certainly find in my conversations with law firms that there's a growing focus on strategy. A lot of that is focused on growth, but also market positioning, future competitiveness. Firms are thinking about how they retain their independence in the future and their culture, but also how they differentiate. In the past, growth tended to be around diversification, merger, international expansion. But now, of course, that also includes for many firms expansion into adjacent services. The third trend I want to quickly mention relates to the modernization of legal practice. And this is actually, some of the results from the poll that we ran today is very relevant to this. So I expect to see an increase in the use of multidisciplinary teams to develop and deliver client solutions, more use of project managers, process engineering, technology experts, and business analysts. A greater recognition that routine legal work needs to be commoditized in order to produce the right outcomes for clients in cost savings and other efficiencies, and the greater use of technology, including knowledge management systems, document automation, and AI. And the final element I'd just like to mention in conclusion on the modernization of legal practice is a growing number of firms that are looking at corporatization and third-party funding. And certainly in my conversations with the investor community, there's a high degree of interest in investing in the legal sector. And this is probably an area that we could spend an hour discussing today. But with that thought, I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you, Richard.
I think we should bring one of those investors back on to, we've had John Llewellyn-Lloyd a year or so back talking about it from his perspective, but I think it'd be interesting to hear that, because as I said, if any external investor sees an industry that is firing at the sort of levels of growth that you were referring to in 2021, that's like a magnet, I think, for them. Richard, Richard Thorby now, come and talk to us a little bit about what you find as a very confidential executive coach, talking to a lot of managing partners. What's really keeping them awake at night? Come on, let's have 5 minutes with your thoughts on that, if I may. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Richard. Sorry, I'm just checking that I'm on. Thank you very much. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'm going to give a sort of broad brush synthesis of my experiences over the last couple of years from my executive coaching practices. I only function in the professional service firm space. I mainly coach managing partners, but also I facilitate peer groups as well. So this is a blend of both. A peer group is 7 to 8 managing partners in a space, some of which groups that have journeyed together for 7 or 8 years together. So over the last couple of years, when I've looked at how managing partners have used those two propositions, they've used executive coaching more along the lines of dealing with private existential issues around having a thinking partner, being challenged in a sort of Socratic way around some of the things that are going on in their lives, but also in their leadership roles. The peer group's been very interesting watching that play out, because the peer groups actually became thinking groups, which became learning groups. It was managing partners exploring with other managing partners how managing partners were dealing with the same issues. And out of that sort of emerged this mutual support and the idea of some form of wisdom. There was a proverb out of, in the multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. And so that very much played out in all the peer groups over the last couple of years. Some of the things that emerged, first of all, on the private space was a lot around, you'll remember a book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, very much played out in the managing partner roles and managing partners. In fact, it was summarized by one who's saying, a year in, feels like I've run a marathon, arrive at the finishing place, only to see a sign that says, now you've got to run another marathon. So lots of exploration of how, around resilience for themselves, but also resilience for their firms. And the idea that you cannot lead others unless you can lead yourself. And lots of exploration of issues about, well, how do you take care of yourself? Because you are very important to your organizations. The other theme that emerged was just repeating what everybody else has said, this idea of the urgency of the now taking over, which morphed into a strange sort of strategy conversation about, instead of looking at strategy, we looked at, well, how do I think about all operational alignment priorities going through the pandemic? What are the priorities? We can't do everything. We're in danger of burning out. The third theme was this interesting conversation about power dynamics, the shift in power. Some of the language that emerged was the quasi-unionization of professional service firms staff, which gave them an increasing voice in what was going on. This was, of course, on the back of the pandemic, but also the rights given to staff as a result of the pandemic, which was mixed with societal voices, increasingly coming into firms calling for increased fairness and inclusion. And those conversations morphed into this conversation about how do I build trust-based organizations? The problem with trust is a problem of trust in our political leaders, trust in society. A lot of the trust-based institutions were breaking down. And so conversations coming into professional service firm leadership about, okay, so how do I build a firm based on trust when I think that staff that come to work for me are entrusting their future to me, clients are entrusting their problems to me. So lots of conversations about that. As you'd imagine, there was conversations about future of work, summarized in the statement, work is now a space, not a place. This came as a result of almost a universal existential appraisal that was prompted by the pandemic. Everybody was asking the big existential themes of meaning, purpose, identity, relatedness, isolation, all these. I ran an existential coaching practice, so I ended up doing a lot of work in this space. This led to what they call the Great Resignation, which was certainly in America, something between 20 and 30 million people deciding to reappraise their lives and do something different, and watching how organizations responded to this, because this is the creme de la creme of the professionals that were doing this, and watching how firms were responding to that, including the ideas of firms doing co-incubation with employees that were thinking about that. Lastly, the big surprise was around IT strategy. So the pandemic was slightly amusing because in the pandemic, it forced everybody home, including the hackers. So the hackers, out they come, and I've had a number of cases of the gut-wrenching experience of journeying with a managing partner who'd been the subject of ransomware, not one, not two, a number. So this was very interesting because then it started to explore the idea of, in terms of IT strategy, is my strategy right? Easy questions around cybersecurity, which morphed into it's impossible to avoid hacking. So how do I become less hackable than my competitors on the basis that hackers, in summary, are actually pretty lazy people? And I had one very amusing conversation between a managing partner and one of these ransomware hackers who said, he couldn't get hold of the hacker. So he said, sorry, I've been very busy. So I can get back to you tomorrow on the issue, which, sorry, is not funny, but it's just a sort of an insight. Lastly, was around the whole theme of relational proximity, where we've had the digitalization of interaction, which has produced a measure of relational proximity in our firms, but unfortunately, probably only an inch thick. So this area we spent a lot of time on this, and also a lot of managing partners saying, if you take any of the other functions within my firms, I have a very good view on how to do strategy around HR, strategy around marketing, finance. But actually, when I do think about IT strategy, I don't even know what the big questions are to ask. So those are the themes that I saw emerge. The summary is an ongoing question: what are the post-pandemic priorities? And every time that people have been considering that, watching how that's changed, has been there's a huge trouble with, what is the new normal? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Richard. And wow, all sorts of amazing topics. I'd like to bring Alan back in now, if I may. Alan, you talked a bit earlier about the larger number of trainees who join you. Can we sort of explore a little bit more the whole, I think Richard called it unionization. Now, is that something that is part of your culture because you're an employee-owned business? But how as leaders do you make sure that your shareholders are fully engaged with the strategy and where the firm is going? I appreciate you have a clear purpose, but even a purpose needs tweaking occasionally, I suspect.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Actually, a lot of the points made by both Neville and Richard there are very recognizable in a professional services firm. Most of their points that they were picking out, yes, I've seen, and we've seen that. So the challenge you have is you might be able to attract people at the bottom end, in the graduates, etc. But there is definitely people expect a voice. I don't know if it's generational, whether it's always generational, if you know what I mean. Always the younger generation expect a voice, but it's louder than ever. The technology and social media have led to a lot of expectations about this. But it is perfectly normal nowadays for people to expect to be involved, consulted, included, and ask their, reasoning behind any strategy, actually any decision almost. I don't know. So the days of command and control are gone in professional services firm, without a doubt. You have to be the world's best negotiator and persuader nowadays to be a leader. You have to have real EQ skills. You've got to be able to listen very hard. The days of when if Arup was a battalion in the army, and if I said, listen, if I'm the leader, I blow my whistle, we're going to climb out of this trench, we're going to walk towards the enemy. In Arup, somebody would say, well, is that safe? Will they be shooting at us? Have you thought this through? I think you should talk to them first. By the way, this lad is an awful design. I can design you a better one. And nobody would move. You actually, this unionization is true, but I think we've got to get used to it. I think life has changed. Life has changed dramatically, and I personally believe so. We do it by engagement. We do lots and lots of, far too many internal meetings, I would guess. Lots and lots of consultation, lots and lots of listening. Every year we have polls, just like you've had polls. We listen to people. We give lots of talks. The way of doing it's changed with technology, as we've just talked about. The fact that you can do things like this. So next week I will talk to all the leadership in Arup. Do it in the morning and afternoon for the time differences, and then we'll do it for all people, all members in Arup, and we will get 7,000-8,000 people on a call, and they ask you a great long list of questions, of which you answer the first 20 out of the 100,000 that asked you type stuff. So the engagement is higher than ever. It's very recognizable, Richard. I think it's one of the challenges that leaders just have to cope with nowadays, if I'm honest.
Thanks, Alan. And that was a really helpful, honest response. Perhaps picking up another of Richard's points, and now perhaps ask Neville to give me his point of view, is probably one of the more technologically savvy managing partners that I'm familiar with, and Richard said that a lot of the managing partners don't even know what the right questions are. I mean, what as a leader, what are the right questions that you might be thinking through wearing a leader of the technology agenda hat?
Well, thank you for your comment, Richard. Let me be clear that any knowledge I have about technology is purely as a layperson, and probably more dangerous than useful. But I think so. I certainly recognize Richard's comments about technology, and sort of in many ways experienced the same issue when I was running BLP all those years ago. I think the first these days, I think the first important point is that one needs to differentiate between technology, which is there for managing the business. So if you like, the plumbing of the firm and the practice management of the firm and the financial management and all of that, and separate from that, if you like, a more recent set of technologies, which is there to help optimize legal practice as such. So, you know, that would include things like workflow and AI and dashboarding, so data analytics for clients. So I think it's, so we need to make that differentiation. And then I think it's quite important these days, certainly in law firms, but I'm sure in other professional services as well, for lawyers, for leaders, not really to develop a deep understanding of how the technology works, but develop a familiarity with what outcomes these technologies can produce, both for the clients, but also for the lawyers that are working alongside these technologies. Because as your poll earlier revealed, most of the some of these technologies replace human experts, but actually most of what these technologies do is enhance the efficiency of the human experts. And even where they replace certain human actions, quite often there needs to be a expert review by a human of the work done by the technology to ensure that it's of the requisite quality and accuracy, etc. So I think one needs to develop an understanding of what outcomes these technologies produce, but then also make sure that one has within the firm sufficient expertise to be able to deploy these technologies. Well, firstly, choose which technologies to acquire, but then how to deploy these technologies across the firm. Because what I see time and time again is that firms have spent quite a lot of money investing in these types of technologies, but then not really taken the next step of investing in the expertise and the people required to sufficiently deploy these technologies across the firm in order to optimize the client services that are on offer. So I'll leave it there for the moment, but that's what I would recommend on that question.
Oh, thank you very much, Neville. I think a lot of people will be reassured. And I think that initial segmentation between those which are internal and those which are far around client-facing activities again, and then how you then disseminate that knowledge across the firm rather than leaving it in little silos, which is all too often sadly the case. Richard, talking about silos for a minute, leaders can find themselves in silos if they're not careful. As a sort of an executive coach, what's your advice to leaders on how to make sure that the various messages that they think are important are shared with their people?
Well, as a purist, as an executive coach, I would have to say that I never give advice, that I journey with clients around the themes of silos. It's very much about the individual managing partner working out how he would like to think about the subject. And it's quite difficult in multi-practice area firms, practice area priorities. I would say I haven't got a good answer to you. I would say that each firm is unique to itself. I would be talking about themes of values. How do you relate together? I would be thinking about relational proximity issues. I would be exploring with the managing partner where their pain point was, or where they thought the pain point was for the firm. So not a good answer, but that's how I'd think about it, of journeying with them.
No, I think it's an excellent answer, and I think pain points is a very key issue. And maybe stay with that one and come back to Alan for a minute. I mean, are there sort of particular challenges across the, I think, 20 years you mentioned, where you've had more of an operational role? I mean, have there been sort of particular pain points that you've identified and then found ways to overcome in that period that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I do think leadership can be very lonely. The loneliness, the long distance runner type stuff. So I think having people that you can turn to of any grade and different backgrounds helps. So actually having sage, wise people around you that's not to do with age and grey hairs, it's to do with different perspectives, I think, is incredibly useful. And a coach is a very good way of getting that, actually, or getting some of that. Because some of the decisions you make are very influential on people's lives, and you therefore have to take it very, very seriously. And therefore, you never make the rush decision, Richard. Yeah, and you have to try and distinguish between what decisions are we making that are one-way decisions and what are two-way decisions. So, you know, if I go through this door and I realize it was the wrong decision, and you just, other than pride, you admit, you know, guys, this is the wrong decision, you can just go back through the door. That's fine. But there are some decisions where that is almost impossible to do again. Yeah. And actually having the discernment to knowing what decision am I making now makes a big difference, I think, to the way you approach things. And the one-way decisions need a lot more thought. And quite often, I don't think we distinguish between those kinds of decisions. So I would actually recommend for most managing partners, some form of a coach is important, some form of a person probably not directly involved, but somebody that you can, over a period of time, I think Richard called it journey with, I think is really interesting. Hello?
Thanks, Alan. No, I'm fine. We're here. Neville, just in your experience, how far down the firm might the coaching go? Do you think it's something that is good, maybe at managing partner level, leader level, but, you know, to what extent might a firm see coaching helping everybody? Because some people would argue that everybody's role has a leadership dimension and a management dimension in it, even at a fairly junior level. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, you know, I guess at some point there's a coaching program and a mentoring program sort of perhaps begin to blend into each other. But you know, I'm a great believer in extending coaching programs beyond the leadership of an organization through to certainly the partner or the partner level in law firms, but in other organizations to senior management, and anyone really with a degree of responsibility for managing other people and for having to take the kind of decisions that Alan was describing. You know, those decisions which impact on other people and can be irreversible are taken not just at the very top of an organization, but can be taken at divisional level, at practice group level, at business unit levels. And therefore, anyone in a leadership role, I think, can benefit from coaching. And then making the slightly wider point, and touching obviously on something you opened today with, Richard, mentoring generally, even for quite junior members of staff, I think is hugely valuable, and provides people just with an opportunity to explore things in a sort of safe conversation, which is completely different really in terms of the way it's set up and structured than any of the other discussions that they can be having with colleagues at work.
Well, I'm afraid this has been a really interesting and great conversation. So I would now like to bring all panel onto the screen. So, and thank you all for your contribution. I'd like to thank Alan for having shared his insights and, you know, quite how you balance 17,000 people and in the leadership, and it's hugely impressive. That's all I can say. I'd like to thank Neville for having shared his words of wisdom, anchored in, as I said, great growth, but that brings its own problems in a way. And for Richard, for just reminding us that actually everybody needs somebody to be part of their journey at all levels. So thank you all very much. I look forward to returning in 2 weeks' time for the next 68th episode. In the meantime, as picking up what Neville said, do think about Mentor Match when the emails start coming in your direction shortly, because it would be lovely to get not your frontline lawyers, but your marketing people, your finance people, your HR people, your tech people, sometimes in the legal world sadly referred to as non-lawyers. I hate that term, but I don't think it applies in non-engineers, Alan, to the same extent. So let's hope that we have great response and get some really great mentorship arrangements set up. And in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend when you get there. Bye for now.